Hey everybody, this is Dan.
This is Ron.
This is the Nominee Questionable Movies. This is the first episode of season three. I think season four. Wow, time flies when you're having fun. Anyway, today we're talking about the 1999, I believe, movie Mystery Men, based on the comic books by Flaming Carrot creator Bob Burden, directed by a guy who only directed this movie and a bunch of Toyota commercials.
Are you serious?
I just looked it up. Yeah, this is his only feature credit.
Oh, wow. I wonder why.
But he apparently sold his house to Ellen DeGeneres for $22 million. So I think the car advertisements probably paid better than the movie. Yeah, because the movie, I also looked up the box office. So 68 million budget, and I think they got half of it back.
Oh, okay.
Although the fact that they spent $68 million adapting a Bob Burden comic book into a big Hollywood movie, I mean, that takes balls. That's not an obvious choice to make, even after The Mask was successful.
Darkman.
Oh, yeah, I guess Darkman's kind of like that in that kind of subgenre. But like Bob Burden, like if you ever read any Flaming Carrot comic books,
No, no.
so Bob Burden's kind of important in the overall history of comics, because Flaming Carrot came out in 1979. It was part of the first wave of kind of self-published comics that weren't like Robert Crumb style undergrounds.
Hmm.
And it's also basically the first revisionist superhero comic book. And so he's coming at it from like a very, very different vantage point than, say, like an Alan Moore or a Frank Miller.
Okay.
And he kind of sees superheroes as this kind of dada. They inherently don't make any sense. And so the best way to write for them is to just kind of absorb the basic tropes and then write them as if you were doing Mad Libs. And I think like you see a lot of that in the movie.
What year was this?
When Flaming Carrot came out,
Yeah.
79 initially, but it's been in publication intermittently, I think ever since. Like there was never an official ending to Flaming Carrot.
What do you remember the last time an issue came out?
I think the last one I actually bought when it came out, it was there's issue 37. So the last one I bought was issue 34.
Okay.
And it was a crossover where he fought Reed Fleming, world's toughest milkman, which is another weird early indie comic. And yeah, I was kind of stunned by how close this movie came like to the feel of a Bob Burden comic.
Mhm.
Like you're just kind of inserting like kind of cultural trends or whatever into this superhero formula with just a reckless disregard, right? We have the villain is disco themed.
Uh-huh.
Why not? And you have a guy who won the Best Picture Oscar 3 years earlier playing this disco villain. His name is Geoffrey Rush. I don't know. This seems like an odd movie to do right after you won an Oscar, but
Was it that? It was for Shine, right?
yeah, that was like 96, right?
Is that far back? Yeah, yeah. Let's see.
Yeah.
I can take it down to 96, 97. So, yeah, 96.
Yeah, and I mean, another thing I was stunned about was like the quality of the cast they got for this movie,
Uh-huh.
right? Because like even the bit parts, they got really good people. Like Luis Lasser shows up towards the end. Who else? William H. Macy. I mean, Ben Stiller. Ben Stiller wasn't. Well, 99 was Ben Stiller a big star at that point?
He's already a star.
Okay. I forget what his first big movie was, because I know that sketch show that he did
Uh-huh.
was 93, I want to say. Um, but yeah, so you got him, you got Janeane Garofalo. Uh, I'm pretty sure Edward James Olmos, who's like kind of the ship commander in Battlestar Galactica, the reboot.
Uh-huh.
He's playing their like mysterious mentor guy.
That was Edward J. Olmos?
I got to double check that, but like I was like 80% sure because he kept falling out of the character voice a little bit, and I could hear the Battlestar Galactica thing,
Uh,
but don't quote me on that.
no, it was Wes Studi,
Oh, okay, I have no idea who that is.
Smalltown, Oklahoma native, internationally acclaimed actor and musician.
Hmm. Well, I guess the internations don't include Mechanicville.
He was in Dances with Wolves and The Last of the Mohicans.
I'm gonna be honest. I never actually saw Dances, or no, I did see Dances with Wolves in high school, and I must have blocked it out of my memory because I just remember it being long.
Let's see, Avatar, Mystery Man. Yeah, it's been in a bunch of stuff, but I'm guessing not like as the main role.
Yeah, you got Tom Waits.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, Tom Waits is great in this.
he was so good in this, and then you have what's her name that was in Mallrats? He has his girlfriend in Mallrats, not Shannon Doherty, but the other one.
Oh, I don't remember her.
I'm pretty sure that's her.
What else has she been in?
I feel like those are the only two movies I ever saw her in. Or at least I think that's her. This could be another case of me like drawing connections where there are none.
What's the girlfriend's name in Mallrats? Is it Brandy by chance?
Randy, yep, that's the one.
Okay, let's see. So the actress's name is Claire Forlani.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, you're correct. She plays Monica in Mystery Men.
Was she in anything else?
She was in Meet Joe Black. Recently she's been in a TV show called Domina. She's been in Black Beauty. Trying to find the Hawaii Five-O TV series that came out about half a decade ago. Los Angeles.
I feel like everybody's been in NCIS Los Angeles, or I feel like you they don't give you a SAG card until you've shown up on an NCIS show at some point.
Yeah, then Mystery Man, Meet Joe Black. She was in Basquiat.
Oh, I never saw that one. I should watch that at some point.
Her first appearance was in a TV movie called Scruples as Billy Winthrop Eichhorn. Anyway, yeah, maybe so this is these people were not cheap at this point.
Oh, no, hey. This was a pretty expensive movie to make. Like the effects all look pretty legit. Like the costumes are more colorful and varied than in the Bryan Singer X-Men movies, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. I don't know. You've seen this before, right?
Yeah. I saw it years ago. I saw it when it first came out, and I saw it a few years ago.
Okay, so you've watched this 3 times now.
Mm-hmm.
I think I saw it like 20 years ago.
Yeah. When it came out?
No, it was definitely because 99, I would have been, I don't think I could have dragged my parents to go see this one. I remember my older sister and my brother-in-law are the biggest Tom Waits fans in the world, I would say. And so she was telling me to watch the movie, and I don't think I understood it at the time because there's not like a lot of like laugh out loud, haha kind of stuff, but there's just this consistent surreal tone that like kind of at least it drew me in throughout the movie. And there were a few really good lines. I'm blanking. There's like the thing William H. Macy says before they go into Disco Casanova's lair or whatever. But I guess, what did you think of it this time?
I enjoyed it this time more than I did the first 2 times. I know the first time I was like, eh. And then when I saw it a few years ago, I thought I'd give it another shot. But I wasn't. Again, I wasn't too excited about it. I didn't mind that I was only half paying attention. So this time I wasn't expecting to like that much, to be a little disappointed by it, but I wasn't. I think maybe I was more receptive this time to the tone. Maybe that's the problem. They've got all the star power. By the way, we left out Hank Azaria and Paul Rubens.
And Janeane Garofalo.
And Janeane Garofalo. So these people, they're between all these people, it's not cheap just in terms of the casting. Then you've got the special effects and the costumes and stuff. And
Eddie Izzard. We forgot Eddie Izzard.
Eddie Izzard and Greg Kinnear.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, lots. It's a star-studded cast, which is never a good sign for a movie, right?
Right. It's too many cooks in the kitchen.
But maybe, and then there's, the special effects and the costumes, and just general, expensive movie things about movies. they spend all this money, they're expecting a Hollywood hit to get a Hollywood hit out of it with all these people. But the problem is that instead of going Hollywood, the movie actually emulated is it Butler? Is that his name?
Oh, Bob Burden.
Burton. It emulated Bob
Like Burden, like you're a this is just a sample set, but like you're a burden to your parents, that kind of burden.
Okay, not Burton. Burden. Okay. So, but instead of going Hollywood, they emulated Bob Burden's style too well for mass audience appeal.
Right, because like The Mask was based off of an indie comic that was pretty violent and kind of fucked up, but they made it Hollywood.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they were expecting for Mystery Men, right? Because like The Mask, I remember that was one of the first 2 or 3 movies I remember seeing in a theater. Mm-hmm. Like that was huge. In Mystery Men, although I think Mystery Men, honestly, if I watched The Mask tomorrow, I think Mystery Men probably held up better.
Okay. I'm curious.
I haven't watched The Mask in a very long time.
I didn't enjoy The Mask that much, and I haven't seen it since then. I also saw that in the theater. Yeah, I wasn't a big fan, but I was never a big Jim Carrey fan. I didn't like Ace Ventura either. I didn't like what's the Dumb and Dumber? So yeah, I was never a huge Jim Carrey fan. But I wonder now if I rewatch The Mask if I like it better.
I like Dumb and Dumber, but by and large, yeah, Jim Carrey is just kind of like a less appealing Jerry Lewis to me.
I could see that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like he's the heir to Jerry Lewis in the 90s. Like he's kind of one of the last guys doing a lot of physical comedy, but it just, I don't know, maybe just the tone of movies changed to the point where like that kind of broad physical comedy just doesn't work within the structure of the movie as much as it used to.
Wait,
and you know what it is about like Ace Ventura versus like a Jerry Lewis movie is his characters are always kind of overconfident, whereas the Lewis characters are kind of always neurotic.
Yeah, okay. The Mask is the character is definitely overconfident. But Dan, something about it was successful. I mean, it was a mega hit, right? A lot of people really enjoyed it. I think I don't remember how.
Oh yeah. I mean, Jim Carrey was like, until I got to middle school, Jim Carrey was like the biggest comedy figure that I remember. Like all the kids were talking about Jim Carrey, like Ace Ventura. Yeah. Even through high school, I remember there were kids where they were just like, Ace Ventura was the funniest movie they ever saw.
So his brand of broad comedy was working.
Yeah. And like, I do really like his stuff on In Living Color.
What was that?
Like, I think he was really good on In Living Color.
Oh, I couldn't stand him on that.
Oh, okay. Well, I really like that one sketch where he's playing Vanilla Ice, basically.
Yeah, I don't remember that. I remember there was, what is it, like a captain with this, he would stick his teeth out. Oh, I couldn't stand that one.
I mean, I guess the appeal of Jim Carrey is that, like, as the audience, you feel really flattered because, like, clearly this man has like a desperate emotional need to entertain you. I think a lot more people get off on that than admit it.
You know what I liked him on? Before In Living Color, he was in a short-lived TV series called The Duck Factory. Are you familiar?
Oh, I never even heard of that.
Oh, we should see if we could find it. It was cute. It was about he works at a small animation studio, and he draws, like, the cartoon that he draws is a duck.
Huh.
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't remember the rest. I remember bits and pieces of it, like little snippets of plots. Oh, and it's got there was an actor who used to show up in a comic actor. He used to show up in all sorts of stuff. Let's see, Jack something.
Huh.
No, I'm looking up a funny thing happened on the way to the forum because I know he's Zero Mostel, Phil Silvers, Michael Crawford, Jack Guilford.
Oh, okay. I'm sure I'd recognize his face if I saw it.
It is said that Jack Guilford invented the expression "the butler did it" as part of one of his movie satire routines.
I've definitely heard that before.
That he
No, just the phrase "the butler did it." Like, I kind of figured that was one of those like folk sayings that came out of nowhere.
Oh, he was blacklisted. He was in the Cracker Jack commercial for a few years.
And Kel Mitchell was in Mystery Man.
Who?
Kel Mitchell.
Oh, who is that?
He plays the guy who can become invisible when nobody's looking.
Oh, yeah.
And I have a lot of fond memory because he was like a big deal on Nickelodeon at that point.
That's Kel of Keenan and Kel.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay,
And
okay.
I remember the Keenan and Kel sitcom like very, very fun. Like the two kind of black sitcoms that were on Nickelodeon at that point,
Uh,
or at least at the point where I was watching a lot of Nickelodeon.
uh,
They were both great. Like My Brother and Me, I remember being really funny, and Keenan and Kel was a good show. I remember. I mean, I granted, if I watch both of these now, maybe I'd have very differing opinions, but I remember them fondly.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I always kind of wondered why he didn't have more of a career because, like, Kenan Thompson went on to do a lot of stuff,
Right.
and I always thought Kel was the funnier one.
And Keenan has been at Saturday Night Live now for over a decade. He's the longest last.
Yeah, and like, give me, yeah, and like I've seen Good Burger like more times than an adult man should admit to.
I remember several years ago, I tried watching it because of that, uh,
My obsession with it,
because of what?
because of my obsession with it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And oh man, Dan, I couldn't finish it.
That might just be one of those like it takes me back to childhood things, but like I don't know, that's the kind of stupid humor that I like,
Uh,
I guess. I mean it's not like it's not Ozu.
it's not as funny as Ozu.
Well, okay, do you ever see any of Ozu's like early silent movies?
No,
A lot of them are gross out comedies.
no kidding.
Yeah, there's one called I Was Born But dot dot dot, and there's just like there's fart jokes, there's poop jokes. It's like much faster paced. Like he didn't, I mean, I think like the number of Ozu movies there are versus the amount of them that have made it to the United States in a way where they're easy to find.
Hmm.
All of it's kind of focused on his 40s and 50s output, which grant, that it is better. He reaches his mature stage and he's making just like, just banger after banger, right? But it took him like a good 10-15 years to get to that style, I think. Now I'm just imagining Yasuhiro Ozu's version of Good Burger. I guess, well, first thing, there's no chairs in the restaurant.
Second thing, there's only one way of looking into the restaurant, and that's from outside through the doorway.
Kel has a daughter who's going to get married.
Okay.
Right? That's in like so many Ozu movies. Like there's a daughter that lives with a father and she's going to get married at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody's Japanese. It's really weird because like those later Ozu movies, it's the same studio that put out Godzilla.
Are you serious?
Yeah, they got the Toho credits.
Huh.
Yeah, like weird stuff. Maybe we should cover an Ozu movie because there might be a deeper discussion to be had about that than.
Oh, I'd love to see Tokyo Story again.
Oh yeah, Tokyo. Did you ever see Late Spring?
Probably.
That one's probably my favorite, but there's so many good ones.
This is now going back well over a decade. But there was an Ozu festival somewhere here. And I had a friend who knew about movies that are playing all over the place and knew a lot about foreign films and independent films, and so we went and saw a bunch of Ozu movies. And I thought he was an Ozu expert, and he was like, "No, he just found this festival of Ozu movies, so figured let's go see some Ozu." So that's how.
Yeah, I would do that in college.
What's that?
I would do that in college because like I hadn't really found a social clique, so I would get out of classes and I went to like most of a Carl Dreyer retrospective. He's another guy where like he did some pretty funny comedies and you wouldn't think that he was capable of it.
I saw so many movies from with all the different film societies, all kinds of movies, like taking over a large lecture hall and on a school projector.
We haven't covered any Carl Dreyer movies yet, have we?
I don't think so, but I'm not certain.
I think we were talking about doing Ordette at some point.
That sounds familiar. Okay, no, we haven't done any Carl Dreyer.
But the really funny one is Master of the House, which is like kind of it's not one of his major movies, but it's a silent movie that kind of doesn't get played ever.
Okay.
I got lucky. I saw it at BAM with a live pianist. Yeah, I would have a lot to say about Carl Dreyer. I think I was enjoying Mystery Men, and I was just sort of like, yeah, let's watch this. And I hadn't really thought further.
Because it was on Peacock. It showed up on
Yeah, because it was I signed up for Peacock. I have a streaming subscription now.
And now I that's
Mm.
yeah, so Mystery Men, do you want to describe the plot?
Yeah, so you have a bunch of superheroes with very questionable powers. There's a guy who's really good with a shovel. There's a guy who throws forks. There's a guy whose superpower is just that he gets angry. So he's sort of like the Hulk with no superpowers.
Yeah.
He's just like a dude with an anger problem. And there's the Blue Raja, which was kind of
It's the guy
a
that
subtle joke that they winked at when Luis Lasser shows up.
Mhm.
Like that was one of the lines I laughed out loud at was Hank Azaria. He's like, what is it? I'm not actually Indian, and there's no blue on my costume. But if you know the history of the area, this all makes sense. um, uh, who else is there? There's Janeane Garofalo has her like dead superhero father's spirit in a bowling ball that attacks people.
Yeah.
And there's basically like a Superman riff played by Greg Kinnear called Captain Awesome. He gets kidnapped by Disco Casanova, played by, I forget which one of them's actually Disco Casanova, if it's Geoffrey Rush or if it's Eddie Izzard. But basically, Geoffrey Rush and Eddie Izzard, they're these like disco themed supervillains.
Geoffrey Rush is Casanova Frankenstein.
Oh, Casanova Frankenstein, excuse me. And so they kidnap him, and then it kind of falls to these like third string superheroes to get him out. And so they train together.
Well,
they go, huh?
They meet up with Phoenix. Is that his name? No, the Sturgeon, the guy that trained
Tom Waits.
No. So they meet up with another superhero who trains them.
Right.
Out, you left Paul Rubens as the spleen.
Oh yeah. Paul Rubens. This isn't his best role, but it's always nice to see Paul Rubens. I think any regular of the show knows that we both love Paul Rubens.
Yeah, it was nice to see him. Very different from Pee Wee.
Very.
They also meet up with a weapons specialist and genius, as his card says. But it's all non-lethal weapons. So there's like tornado in a can.
Well, and I thought that was another really good like superhero deconstruction thing, right? Because they just don't bother to explain it. And you kind of think about it in real terms, like this guy's going to destroy an entire city, but we have to make sure it's all non-lethal weapons.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's kind of a theme that gets explored in some of the like superhero revisionism stuff that comes after Flaming Carrot. Because like Flaming Carrot, I think is one of the less, it's not a super dark comic book versus like, the Dark Knight Returns take on that is Batman refuses to kill the Joker, so the Joker breaks his own neck. It's like a lot more kind of grim and gritty. And I think in favor of Bob Burden in his kind of vision of this stuff, when you do the grim and gritty deconstruction, it almost lends the material kind of dignity and gravitas that it doesn't necessarily deserve. Which obviously that's not going on in Mystery Man.
Right.
How do you, because you've watched way more superhero movies than I have, right?
Probably.
You've watched more than 5.
Oh, okay, yes. Then I see.
Okay, so how does this relate to the later superhero movies in your head, or does it have any relation?
I think there's a little bit in the Joss Whedon Avengers movie, probably
like the quippiness,
the little bit of the little bit of quibbling and bickering. There's that kind of stuff in there. Stuff that you didn't see, for example, in the 1978 Superman or in Dark Knight, except in so much as or Dark Knight, or even the Tim Burton. No, even the Tim Burton Batman. Like the villains were always, Batman's villains were always a little goofy.
Yeah, I think the closest thing to this is like Adam West Batman, kind of, and it's not on that level.
It's not on that level.
But
and it's only a little bit of. It's not the kind of truly dysfunctional relationship that these, what do you call them, third string superheroes,
Yeah, like they're kind of, and I, one thing I did really like about the movie is that it doesn't really, they're all portrayed as just like weird people with these compulsive behaviors that cause problems for them.
Yeah.
Right, like the shoveler, like his marriage is about to end, but he can't stop going out and hitting people with the shovel. And like I thought the scene where what is it, Mr. Furious, Ben Stiller, he's about to go fight Casanova Frankenstein, and he's on the steps with what's her face, and she's just like, just be Roy. And like when he's going through the superhero names, and it just looks so ridiculous. Like I think that's the most cutting criticism of superheroes in this movie, is just how like ridiculously pathetic Ben Stiller looks in that scene until he finally says that his name's Roy.
But then he becomes Mr. Furious. It turns out he does have a power.
Right, and it's, and that's kind of weird, where it's like he redeems himself by proving he has an anger problem. And like I almost got the sense at the end of this that they're setting up a sequel that just never happened, obviously, because they lost a bunch of money on this movie. I would have liked to see a Mystery Men too. I think they could have gone further. And okay, another thing that's kind of very different about this than most of the other superhero movie, although I guess like this throws it in with the 78 Superman, sort of. Or no, 78 Superman, there is an origin scene. There's like the part where Orson Welles is, or Marlon Brando's talking as his dad. Yeah. Mystery Men has no origin scenes.
Oh, you're right.
And there's not really any discussion of why this guy decides to like go around with a shovel or whatever.
You don't see the origin of any one hero. This is the origin of the group Mystery Men.
Oh yeah, I guess in that sense it is an origin, and that kind of ties it to the Whedon Avengers.
Right. It's all about the Avengers forming.
But like without the individual origin stories, because the thing the origin story is supposed to do is it's this sleight of hand, right? It's supposed to make it not seem ridiculous that a grown-ass man is dressing up as a bat or whatever and going out all night beating people up.
Whereas here we see a scene in which they're all sewing their clothes, all sewing their costumes. Although, with Spider-Man, we get a little bit of that in the comic book.
Oh yeah, the early Steve Ditko comics. Yeah, he sews his own costume. In the origin story, he sews his own costume, and that's why he's got that weird costume when he's in the wrestling ring. And I think they kept that in the Raimi Spider-Man movie.
The story.
Yeah, that he like made his own costume, and then somebody else made the next costume, because like the idea that Peter Parker, being who he is, also knows how to sew at an expert level seems kind of ridiculous. Like in the comic books, you have like Amazing Fantasy 15, right? That's the one where Uncle Ben gets killed, blah, blah, blah. Amazing Spider-Man #1, I'd have to go back and reread it, but I'm pretty sure they explain the costume as like Reed Richards gives him a costume made out of unstable molecules, right? Which is how they would always explain how like, these costumes that are getting torn or whatever all the time it explains why half the comic book isn't like the dude sewing.
Whereas here, that's certainly going to happen.
Yeah. Oh, and I remembered one of the lines that really got me. What is it? It's towards the end. Janeane Garofalo just talking to a bowling ball was pretty funny to me. And at the end, where she's like, "Now I get to go to grad school. That was the deal." That was pretty funny. I don't know. It's just like it was a fun movie to watch. And Tom Waits, he's always Tom Waits, but like I don't mind it, because like who doesn't love Tom Waits?
Well, we were talking about this the other day about how I don't really like his singing voice, but I really like him as an actor. He's a great character actor.
Remember, I read an interview with somebody like a long time ago where they were saying Tom Waits tried to prank call them.
No kidding.
And like the fact that he thinks he can pull off a prank call and somebody immediately know it's Tom Waits.
That he thinks he wouldn't be recognized.
I almost wonder if that was the joke and he was in on it. But yeah, I mean, Tom Waits, he was always kind of theatrical. Like he was always taking like his his big musical influences were kind of Frank Sinatra, Randy Newman, Captain Beefheart, and Kurt Weill, the German opera.
Is that what he said?
Yeah. Kurt and he was involved in a production of the Three Penny Opera at some point that was recorded. But yeah, and like you listen to his early live albums, you hear it a lot. He's hamming it up. He knows how to play an audience. He's playing this drunk character. And a lot of the songs, he's in a character, which at least in the early songs is kind of inevitably sad and drunk. And I saw him live.
Oh,
probably like it was the last tour he did.
Okay.
It was the Glitter and Doom tour. I want to say it was 2008. And yeah, like he had the audience eating out of the palm of his hand. He was one of the most natural stage performers I've ever seen. Like I can totally see how he built this cult around him, because the records don't quite get across that element of it. And I think the records, like, he's recorded a lot of stuff, and a lot of it is pretty uneven. There's like a string of 3 records in the early 80s that are just basically like nothing but hits, or I guess nothing but hits in the context of the Tom Waits catalog. And everything else is kind of uneven. And I think he kind of goes into the growly stuff a bit too much in the 90s.
That's how I was first exposed to Tom Waits, right at that era.
Yeah, like I would say the first Tom Waits album to check out, I mean, the best one is Rain Dogs. I think that's kind of the general consensus, and I don't disagree with that. But yeah, he's just he's a very good entertainer, and he's a really funny, like, he's really good in interviews, because he's just kind of a dude that has his hobbies or whatever. I remember reading this interview with him years ago where he's talking about like his favorite show on TV was Pimp My Ride.
Seriously?
And I'm like, yeah, and I'm trying to imagine Tom Waits watching Pimp My Ride. And I think about it, he wrote a lot of songs about cars. That guy loves cars.
Uh-huh.
Probably the Tom Waits song that most people would know, not because Tom Waits sang it, but because the Eagles sang it, is Old 55.
That's a Tom Waits song?
Yeah, that's a Tom Waits song. That's off his first record.
Ooh.
I mean, there's a few Tom Waits songs that have been covered and became pretty big, like Downtown Train by Rod Stewart.
Yeah.
You ever heard that one?
Yeah.
That's the second or third to last song on Rain Dogs.
Huh.
And then Rod Stewart just kind of ripped the soul out of it and turned it into money. I'm trying to. I mean, Scarlett Johansson did an entire album of nothing but Tom Waits covers. That's one of the strangest vanity projects I've ever heard.
Yeah.
It's like her and one of the dudes from TV on the radio.
I didn't realize that Scarlett Johansson sang.
It's debatable, but she put out a record at least. I mean, I guess in traditional terms, she sings better than Tom Waits, but I would rather hear Tom Waits sing this stuff.
You know what year this came out? The Scarlett Johansson album?
It was when I was in college, so it had to be like 08, 09.
Okay, so she was already, was she already doing the
She was a big star by that point.
Okay.
Like I think it was like 3 or 4 years after because Lost in Translation was her big like breakout role, right?
I don't remember.
Well, because she's in Ghost World, and then Lost in Translation came out pretty soon after Ghost World. I think Lost in Translation got a lot more attention than Ghost World.
Yes, it did.
And I remember watching Lost in Translation, and I don't get it. I don't know, like it just didn't seem to live up to the hype.
I'm constantly confusing Lost in Translation with Up in the Air. They're the same movie to me in my head.
I don't know if I ever saw Up in the Air.
And I don't know why. I think Up in the Air is the one that I enjoyed more. But yeah, they're kind of mixed in my head.
Yeah, because like the first 3 minutes of Lost in Translation, great. I saw this when it came out, and I never bothered to watch it again. It's just a gratuitous butt shot, right? It's just Scarlett Johansson, and I mean, she's got a nice butt. Like I'm not criticizing her butt. I'm just criticizing like what is the choice being made here. And I feel like parts of it probably age kind of weirdly because it's almost in that like later Woody Allen formula. Right, because there's supposed to be a romantic subtext between her and Bill Murray.
Right.
And I'm just thinking the whole movie, like, I'm not 90 years old and I'm available. Call me. And all that stuff came out about Bill Murray.
Oh, what
Well, I mean, there was stuff that was already like he got a domestic violence rap a long time ago, but apparently, like, he got fired off a movie for basically just like going around grabbing people's asses.
Okay.
Which, I mean, it doesn't seem that weird to me. I don't know, right? Because like his whole career is kind of based on this character where he's an asshole.
Yeah, but things change over time.
Or I guess like he was in a bunch of Wes Anderson movies too. Oh man, we should hate watching a Wes Anderson movie.
I'm trying to think of which ones I actually enjoyed.
I remember I loved Rushmore the first time I saw it.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, because the first time I saw Rushmore, I was probably like late middle school. And it was one of the first kind of like middle brow indie movies I ever saw. I remember the Olivia Williams character kind of reminded me of my high school girlfriend after the fact. And but I think most of the reasons I related to that movie were reasons of like egotism.
How so?
I related a lot to the Jason Schwartzman character.
He was looking down on everyone.
Well, he's looking down on everybody and he's doing like every extracurricular in the school and he thinks he's really hot shit. And I think the movie has more self-awareness about that than I had about that when I saw it. But yeah, no, I mean, the reason I related to that character was because I wanted to think I was hot shit. I think. And Royal Tenenbaums, I don't know if I ever finished Royal Tenenbaums.
I didn't understand why people were so in love with it.
Yeah, it's just like a second-rate J.D. Salinger knockoff. It's just like sad white people being sad. Or that was the vibe I got anyway. I mean, he always had really good taste in records. Like those soundtracks were always when I was 13 or 14. That's how I found a lot of kind of obscure British invasion rock records.
Through Wes Anderson movies?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
yeah,
cool.
because there's some deep cuts in there, or at least definitely deep cuts to a 13-year-old, like Making Time by The Creation. I don't think anybody's ever heard that outside of the context of Rushmore. Bum, bum, ba-da-da, Making Time. That one.
I don't remember it.
It's catchy. The rest of that record's pretty good. Or no, not The Creation. It's The Action. That's the name of the band. It's like ungoogleable band.
Rushmore Wes Anderson's first movie?
No, the first movie is Bottle Rocket.
Oh, yes. Okay, I knew that. Okay, and then Rushmore. I like Bottle.
I can't remember. I definitely saw Bottle Rocket. I think I was too young to get whatever was going on. And then I think the last one I saw was I saw Life Aquatic, and I was like, this is quirky, but it's not the greatest movie ever made. Like, I remember the hype around that movie was so huge. And like to this day, having like collected DVDs for a while, Life Aquatic is the single most common Criterion DVD, like by like a 10x margin.
I'm not surprised.
Maybe the closest one's Chasing Amy, but
really?
Oh yeah, I've seen so many copies of Chasing Amy. And I think Chasing Amy, there was only a Criterion release, and I think that in Life Aquatic they were discounted because that was because Criterion usually when they put stuff out they don't buy an exclusive license. So that's why sometimes you'll see like an Anchor Bay version and then also a Criterion version. And I'm pretty sure they had an exclusive deal with Life Aquatic because I've never seen a non-Criterion Life Aquatic. I think they have some kind of deal with like Noah Baumbach and Wes Anderson because like they make a movie and it just immediately goes into the Criterion collection. I mean, I guess in Wes Anderson's defense, at least he's not Noah Baumbach.
Yeah, I can't stand most of Noah Baumbach.
Yeah, well, remember we covered Marriage Story?
Yes,
because I think the ex podcast had to watch it she was going on a podcast, so she needed to watch it. And you were over. We were like, all right, we'll just do this.
Yeah,
and, I mean,
I remember that. Yeah, I didn't care for that movie.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wish that I could have gotten over, the big breakups in my life by getting a lot of money to do experimental art theater in New York. Right. Remember, that's the end of the movie is just like he gets some kind of giant grant to do like the equivalent of like tampon in a teacup art. Or that was, and I like Adam Driver. Like on Girls, Adam Driver gives like an incredible performance. Like I watched through all of Girls a few months ago.
He's great as Kylo Ren in Star Wars.
He's a really good actor. He's just like they're just feeding him scraps in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I ever actually saw like Squid and the Whale in the other one. But yeah, at least like Wes Anderson, there's like quirky visual spectacle with Noah Baumbach. It's just like overhearing a really unpleasant conversation in a suburban Starbucks. Hey, Noah Baumbach, if you're listening, come on the show, defend yourself.
Anderson, tell us something that doesn't involve rich white people.
Introduce me to Greta Gerwig.
There we go. Yeah,
well, I did meet Greta Gerwig once.
Really?
Yeah. It was when I just got into college. I was going to the IFC Center a lot,
mm-hmm.
and there was a movie by Joe Swanberg, who's kind of another no talent hack. But man, did that guy get big! Joe Swanberg, he got his own Netflix show and all this stuff.
What show?
I think it was just called Casual. It was like an anthology series about like awkward hookups or something. I can't remember, but the name of the movie that he made with Gerwig, he made, I want to say 2 movies with Gerwig because I think they were dating at one point. What was it? It was Hannah Takes the Stairs, which is the one I saw, and then Nights and Weekends. And Hannah Takes the Stairs is sort of like, it's like all the mumblecore people in one movie, for better or worse. Okay. And anyway, it had just premiered, and I was going to like a 10:30 screening because I was a complete insomniac back then. And there's these, and I think I'm in the line waiting for the movie because there's these 2 other people in front of me, and they go in. So I just follow them, and then they go up and they do the Q&A, and it's Joe Swanberg and Greta Gerwig. I introduced myself to them outside. It's like, hey, you guys seen this movie yet? Is it good? I think I said something like that. And Greta Gerwig in person is the palest human being I've ever seen in my life. It's like when you peel an onion. I mean, she was very pretty, like it's not a criticism or anything, but just shocking, like moths. We're probably attracted to her. Yeah, Joe Swanberg. Joe Swanberg had like a pretty infamous, at least in like indie movie circles, like he had a kind of infamous run-in with John Jost, our friend John Jost, who has been on the show multiple times.
Who somehow just seems to pop up everywhere.
He gets around, he's like the Forrest Gump of like the real world.
At least the movie world.
Okay, I got to send him this clip now because I don't think anybody's compared John Jost to Forrest Gump before.
Yeah,
Joe Swanberg sent him his first movie called Lull. Because like Joe Swanberg, before he made it, he was kind of in those same circles of like emailing Ray Carney and all that shit. And John watched it, and John just fucking ripped it to shreds on this message board called Cinema Electronica. And like, I got to find this post because it's like legendary. And then I think that's when Joe Swanberg decided to go commercial, which honestly was probably the right choice, right? Because like artistically he wasn't doing much. So like at least his movies can make him happy and comfortable. I'm just being a dick right now, I think.
So John Jost changed his career.
Yeah, I would say, and it's weird too to think that like, because Joe Swanberg, he kind of did the same thing I did, right? He sent John Jost some stuff and was like, "Hey, be my friend." And but that's one way that I bested Joe Swanberg.
Yeah. But speaking of Mystery Men.
Yeah, Mystery Men. I don't know, were there any things you like disliked about this movie specifically?
Well, truthfully, there's something about the tone that grated on me previously, but this time that I appreciated more. So what didn't I like about the movie this time? We didn't get enough of the villains. It was so focused on the superheroes and their bickering and their foibles and their lack of skill,
Mm.
which they were bumbling. That we didn't get much of the villains, and the villains were fun. I mean, Geoffrey Rush was fun as Casanova Frankenstein,
Mm.
and then what's his name, Eddie Izzard as the disco guy.
Mm.
That was great. So it was great to get at least one scene of him really doing something. But even then, it was mostly about the heroes, since there weren't the heroes were so inept that they weren't the fight scenes were kind of incomplete because they would get defeated so easily.
Mm. Yeah, that was the thing I was going to point out is that there's not really a ton of action in this movie until the end.
Yeah.
And it kind of reminded me of The Tick.
Okay.
It had that same kind of like lighthearted surrealist tone to it.
Uh,
You have this like fascination with diners, although maybe that's just a 90s thing. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting that like literally their only connection to the outside world that has nothing to do with superheroes is that woman at the diner. Although that's not that weird in comic books, right? Like there's no, like in usually in comic books, like there's always that like background story of, you know, every Spider-Man, there's like a J. Jonah Jameson and a Betty Brant.
but
And
the waitress was the Mary Jane to Spider-Man and the Lois Lane to Superman.
that's true.
And they only exist in as much as or insofar as their relationship to Spider-Man and Superman.
Mm.
In the same way here, she really only exists insofar as she serves as Mr. Furious, Ben Stiller's love interest.
Mm. Yeah, she doesn't really get fleshed out at all.
No. Although she shows immense character growth. Personal growth. Yeah, let's call it character growth.
Okay. One complaint about the movie. So when we see Ben Stiller walking her back to her apartment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Has anything in the movie up to that point suggested that she had literally any kind of interest in seeing him outside of like getting tips from him because it's her job?
Nope, nothing at all.
And it just kind of comes out of nowhere, and then she's like, "You got angry for me."
Yeah. There's no reason why this relationship should why their interaction should turn into any kind of romantic relationship.
Yeah, she's like the flip side of the manic pixie dream girl. She's like the like catatonic dream girl.
Yeah.
Kind of like bland, and she's kind of there if you need her in a situation. I guess she's like normcore before it was called normcore. Kind of. Although I feel like a lot of what's called normcore fashion is really just like stuff people wore on 90s sitcoms. Yeah, what else is there to say about this movie?
So what something that I didn't like about it was I didn't like its grittiness. I thought it was grittier than it needed to be. I wanted it to be a little more
Colorful,
in unrealistic colors, like stuff that just I like stylized. And this was stylized, but with this added grittiness that I didn't like.
Well, I feel like the Tim Burton Batman kind of screwed up superhero movie color palettes for maybe up to the present. Like, well, I feel like some of those Marvel movies, like Thor Ragnarok, felt kind of colorful and comic booky. But it's just weird that you're using all this comic book source material. Like a lot of the appeal of comics is that it's just like a lot of flat, bright primary colors. Like the color is kind of garish by default, right? And they never do that in the movies.
Yeah.
And I think it's usually to their detriment, because it's weird. There's always this like superheroes tend to induce this like inferiority complex in creative people, right? Because like so many superhero, like even in comic books, like there's a lot of superhero comics, there's a lot of superhero movies where so many of the decisions seem to be just kind of like, take me seriously, guys. It's really about serious, deep stuff. And it's not. You know, like, I mean, Spider-Man's really about like a teenage boy who's really afraid of women. Like every time he's on a date, Dr. Octopus shows up and he's like, oh, I got to go see my boyfriend. I'll see you later. You know, he just disappears into the bathroom and then gooey stuff comes out of his hand.
Yeah, so Mystery Men. Any other thoughts? How many thumbs up do you give it?
I give it like 3 out of 4 stars. It's not some kind of lost classic, but I've certainly seen much worse movies.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a fun movie.
Yeah.
And it was, how did you put it? It was never haha out loud funny. It was, I can't remember how you described it.
Yeah, it's not like aggressively funny. It just has this a lot of the jokes are pretty subtle, or they're at least like kind of under delivered intentionally. It has kind of a 90s slacker vibe. Like it feels like it's from 1999, but its feet are very firmly planted in the 90s.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't look like a 2000s movie to me. It's also really long for what it is. Like I didn't remember it being a full 2 hours.
Yeah.
Um, Although I almost think they could have made it longer
Yeah.
because they're covering a lot of material.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there was room for more.
Yeah, I guess that's all I got to say.
Okay.
All right, speak now or forever hold your peace.
Well, this is great. This was a much more enjoyable experience than last week with Rabbit Test.
And for those at home that can't see, Ron is holding his peace right now. All right, so I'm still Dan.
I'm still Ron.
And we'll see you at the movies.
Take care, everyone.